The viewers are probably like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Look, look, your silence doesn't help this situation. Hey guys, welcome back to TekShinji. Today we're going to be walking you through the basics on how to assemble a water-cooled loop for your PC. We'll be going over the components, what we chose and why, then showing you the full build from component selection to filling and bleeding the system. I recommend watching the whole video to the end before attempting your water cooling project. All right, so the first thing we want to do in preparing our system is to remove all the things we don't need, such as the front fans and the heatsink. Let me go ahead and do that right now. Got my screwdriver, so we're just going to start unscrewing the... Oh, wait, we actually got to turn the computer off first. So let's go ahead and do that. You generally don't want to take off a heatsink while it's still running. If you look closely, you'll see that this NZXT case has a nice feature where you just take these two out and the whole front fan bracket comes out. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And then there's the bracket. It goes on the front just like that. So this will allow us to mount our radiator right to this. There's a lot of ways where you could do this. You could put the radiator in like this or like this. In this case, it doesn't matter as much, but I think it looks better if the tubes come out of the top. So we're gonna mount the radiator like this. But before we get to that, what we're gonna do is remove the heatsink. One thing you wanna be careful for whenever you put your hands on these cheese grater heat sinks is that they're pretty sharp on the edges. So be careful not to hit anything, get hurt. We got the fan off. We have access to these 4 screws. You can see 2 of them right there. You can see the other 2 right inside there. For projects like this, I do recommend having a really long screwdriver. It really helps because if you look at the case, most cases are about this thick. This lets you get to the very bottom without contacting a side panel or a top mounted item. So what we're gonna do is take out our 4 CPU heatsink screws. So I'm just gonna hold it because we don't want to hit our really expensive 3050 GPU. Now we've taken out the heatsink, we're just gonna go ahead and clean up this thermal paste that's left over. For that, we're just gonna use isopropyl alcohol and a rag, but pro tip, you wanna use a dry rag first. So that's what a 12th gen Intel CPU looks like. The corners are more rounded, I actually didn't know that.
It's an 11400.
That's what a 11th gen CPU looks like. The corners are more rounded. I didn't know that. We're gonna edit that out, right? What I like to do with my old hardware is just to put everything back the way it was. That way, if I ever want to use this in the future, I know I have all the parts. Now that we got the old CPU air cooler out, we're gonna take a look at our block before we install it. So this Barrow water block comes with very simple mounting components. So it's this back plate right here that goes behind on the motherboard, just like the one you saw. And then on this one, it appears that you should use these simple studs right here. So the way it works, spring goes in like that, this goes like that, and then this goes in right here and goes in like that. So this motherboard is a LGA 1200 series socket, and this is designed for 1150, but the LGA 1200 1150 are backwards compatible, so you don't have to worry about that. All right, I'm gonna show you a little secret. I got some masking tape here, okay? There's a lot of times where you're trying to put these back plates on, right? Just like that. And then what I like to do, take some masking tape. I would use something like masking tape, nothing too strong, and just kind of do one of these, and that'll keep it from falling off when you flip the case over to work on it. This is Thermal Grizzly Kryonaut, some of the good stuff. So we're just gonna go in right here and put a nice kidney bean size of thermal paste. All right, so before we go ahead and install this, I just wanna point out, look carefully on which way is the inlet and outlet. Officially, there's no real difference. It's maybe 1 to 2 degrees at most if you flow this backwards. So if you look real carefully, you can kind of see how it goes into the jet plate. That's how you know that is the in, as in going into the block. And you can see on the outside, it's going away from the jet plate. That is the return, the exit. So remember, that is the inlet. And of course, we want the logo to be in line with the rest of the system, like with Gigabyte and such. So we're gonna go down straight like this. And then we're gonna get one of these in And then we're gonna put this one in. And then you can go around and do the other ones. It'll make threading the rest of this system a lot easier. Sometimes if you put your hand on the back of the case and just kind of push up on the back plate, that'll also help threading it. We're gonna just go ahead and start tightening this down in a cross pattern. Now that we got the CPU block installed, we're gonna go ahead and get this radiator all set up. So like I said before, guys, this comes with a special mounting bracket, which makes this a lot easier so we don't have to work inside the case. Got the radiator right here. The orientation we're gonna use with the tubes up because I think that'll look aesthetically better instead of the tubes coming down like that. So we got tubes going right across like that. So what we're gonna do is mount the radiator to the bracket, the fans to the radiator, and then we're gonna mount the whole pump assembly on this thing. That way it's all one assembly ready to go. Then we're gonna put it into the machine. There's a lot of space in this cavity right here on the front of the case. So we're gonna actually attach the fans to the front of this radiator and then put everything on the back. So another thing you wanna take a look at before you tighten everything down is where your wires are gonna go, right? So remember, this is gonna be mounted in the case like this. So we probably want the wire to be over here. That way it can go to the back of the case a little bit easier. So we want it to be kind of like that. On top of that, we won't really see as much. We're not gonna see anything other than that anyway. All right, so now we have the fans installed. You can see, remember this part is gonna be all inside this cavity. You won't really see it. What you're really gonna see is the parts back here. Now we're gonna install the pump and plumb it up to the radiator and get it ready for the CPU block. And this is gonna go like that right on the front. This is a D5 pump by EK. It's got the clear acrylic base so we can see the pump moving and all that good stuff. This can come as a complete assembly or you could buy it separately. Something like this, which is what we call a pump reservoir combo. This is something I would recommend for beginners because then you have two components in one and you don't need to mount them separately or plumb them separately. It goes right together. So it's gonna go something like that. And we wanna make sure we have clearance on things. This top portion can rotate. Just take this ring off and we just unloosen this and we can rotate this to any orientation. This is the special bracket that will be in the parts list below. This will help you mount the reservoir combo to the fan, to the radiator itself. That way it doesn't go anywhere. And we got these 4 screws that are gonna go right there. So now you can see how everything is starting to come together. See the fans in the front that turn and blow air this way, go right into the radiator and through and into the system. And of course we have the pump system here. If you guys don't understand how this works, we actually have a video that describes exactly how water cooling works. Check that video out when you get a chance right after this one. Now the part with fittings, everyone's favorite part. So on an EK D5 pump res combo, if you want to come here real close and look, you can actually see these little arrows that represent in and out. So this is a intake and this is a outtake, and you can actually see inside on this special acrylic kind. And let me just take the reservoir off. You can actually see on the inside how this cut right here is on both ports. And you can see how this goes directly into the pump itself. So that is the discharge and this is the intake. We're gonna make the return, as in going back into the reservoir, coming out of the top of the radiator just like that. And then this one going to the CPU and this one going to the CPU. So one line to CPU from here and this going right in here. That way we don't have to go like this. All right, so just one clean line. So we're gonna make that first plumbing line first. Starting with the components all outside the case because it's kind of hard to get into these upper corners after you install everything. So what we're gonna do is kind of really plan things out because you really wanna figure this out before you put it in. So we know we wanna go from this fitting right into the reservoir. So this will be the return into the reservoir. And EK, if you buy EK parts, it comes with this tool, this multi-tool, and this really helps torque things down. Now, to be very clear, you only need to turn this to where the O-ring crushes. Don't go anywhere past that, especially on acrylic parts. Because if you look at my other video about cleaning my CPU block, you'll see I actually cracked the plexi top when I torqued it too much. So that's from experience. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put this in here and just kind of go until it stops. That's it. We're not gonna go anywhere past that. Now we know that's fully in there. So this is just a 90-degree rotary fitting. Again, we're gonna put it in until it stops, and then that's it. Then we're gonna rotate it And then we're probably going to take a 90 fitting like this, put it into our other 90, and get another fitting, and put this one in right here. Now you see I'm moving this around and such. This is really helpful when you have rotary fittings because then you can really get things in and move it around. So this is the general plan layout, what I'm going to do up here. As you can kind of see, there's going to be a little bit of an angle, but that's going to connect the radiator return into the reservoir pouring down. Now you might be thinking, what's this for, TekShinji? Well, this is going to go to the CPU. So looking at the CPU, we already know which way we want the flow to go ideally. So this bottom one is going to be the intake. This top one is going to be the return. So we already know coming out of the reservoir that this will be out, going out. And since it's going to be mounted like this, we know that this is going to make kind of an angle to the bottom one right here. And then this fitting right here will go into right here. So let's get that started. We already know we need to put 2 fittings in right there. Now we got that taken care of. We're gonna go ahead and look at this part right here. So we know that the intake of the CPU is gonna go right to here, which is out on the pump. So it's gonna be kind of hard to do because of the GPU. So we're gonna put a fitting on here after we install it. But essentially what we're gonna have is a 90-degree fitting with a straight fitting right on top, giving you easier access to the tubing. So it'll be like that, and then it'll kind of loop in like that. You would think the smart thing to do would be to remove the GPU and then do all this. But with the GPU installed, this will give us assurance that we're not going to interfere with anything after we install all the plumbing. So pro tip, or maybe not pro tip. It's also a lot harder to work in the case. Since it's going to be really hard to access this area after we get into the case, we're going to go ahead and plumb that right now. So we're just going to measure the distance from here to here. And that way they'll give us a good idea of what we need to cut. Remember, the tube is going to go all the way to the face of the seat right here. So don't measure to the end or here, but to right there. So if we measure here, looks like that's a little bit over 4.5 millimeters, almost 5 millimeters. So now that we cut our piece, we're just going to verify that it's close. And yeah, that looks pretty darn close to me. So let's get that installed. Pro tip, guys, if you're having a hard time installing tubing, take a little bit of your coolant, pour it into the cap like this, and use it as a lubricant. It'll allow things to slide in a lot easier. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that. See, it just kind of goes in like butter. Now this part, you can do it the same way too, but I find it'll be easier if I do it like this. If I take this 90-degree fitting off, dip it in some coolant, give it a nice little bit of wetness, and then go ahead and push it on. Go ahead and put the collar on first because you don't want to miss that. Then push it on. So now we have the return coming into the reservoir connected right into the top right here, and that's all we need for that. So we're just going to put a straight fitting right here and then put it into the system. Note that we did most of the work on the reservoir and radiator before we went ahead and put it into the machine. That allows us to work a little bit more efficiently since we got a lot more clearance to work with. Okay, next step, we're going to go ahead and install our 90 down here. That's going to go into the CPU intake. And we're going to try to hold it at the base and give it a little bit. We're just going to finger tighten it. And there, it stops. So that's it. We got 2 rough cuts of tubing. We're going to go from the top to here. So right here is the out. So it's coming out of the pump into the CPU, out of the CPU, into the radiator, goes into the radiator, out of the radiator, into the reservoir. So that's how this is going to work. Now, the reason why this might look kind of long is because of the type of bends it's going to have to do. We wanted to have plenty of room to not kink. And that's really important because you don't want your tube to kink. This is pretty decent tubing where it won't, but if it kinks, right, you got no flow and then you're going to overheat. So you don't want that. This is a bit long, so we're going to trim it back about an inch or so. Okay, there we go. Now we have our CPU fed with coolant. So we're gonna go ahead and install this upper part right here. Okay, there. And that's it. We have a fully plumbed system. Now, at this point, you might be excited and you're ready to fill this thing, but hold up. We gotta do a pressure test. A lot of people skip this step and like to put paper towels everywhere. We're not gonna use paper towels. We're gonna use the EK leak tester. Remember that little drain valve we put in the system? Well, this also happens to be a great place to hook up our leak tester. It makes it really easy. We just go ahead and open this up, open that up, and then hook up the leak tester to this, and then we can leak test the entire system. That's why we have a drain valve right here, to make it easy to maintain and easy to access for leak testing. And see this valve right here? We want that to be open, okay? Otherwise this won't get any air. And we're gonna get it to about the green zone, okay? That's about as high as you wanna go. You don't really wanna go too high. So at this point, if you're not getting any pressure at all after a couple of pumps, that means you probably got a big leak somewhere. So most common place for that is right on the top of the reservoir where you forgot to put caps or such. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and close this off so air doesn't leak back the other way. We all have smartphones, right? So I like to take a picture of this right there and then come back to this in about 5 or 10 minutes. Been about 5 to 10 minutes and the pressure doesn't seem to have moved very much. What I like to do as like a antidote is to find all your fittings, especially the rotaries and 90s, and just give them a wiggle. Make sure that no pressure escapes when you wiggle them. Go ahead and close this drain valve, put the drain cap on. This isn't necessary, but just looks nice instead of seeing a hole right here. So now we're ready to fill the system, right? Not quite yet. So in a system like this, when you got your first water cooling set up especially, you want a secondary power supply to help the system bleed and fill. Reason being, you really don't want to turn on the main system. If you don't have if you don't have a separate power supply, you can use the main power supply in the system. Just make sure you disconnect your components like your GPU, 24 pin, and your CPU header to the motherboard. That way, nothing is powered. So we're going to be using a 24 pin jumper to manually start this power supply. Go ahead and plug it into the 24 pin. And on this EK-D5 pump, it's actually powered by a Molex connector. So we're gonna go ahead and plug in the Molex. What you're gonna wanna do is, if you don't have something like this, it's kinda hard, you gotta put coolant in right in the top here. So it's gonna go in right there. So we're gonna just go ahead and take our tool and take off this fitting right here, right up in front. And now we're just gonna go ahead and start filling it. All right, so now that we've got our reservoir basically filled to the top right here, just like that, what we're gonna wanna do next is to kind of bump the power supply. So I got my hand right here on the power supply switch. I'm gonna turn it on and let the coolant start flowing. But before it hits the bottom, I'm gonna turn it off. So let's see what happens. And then we're just gonna go ahead and fill it up, because it's so cool to see the CPU block fill and everything get coolant in it. Okay, and then we're gonna give it another power on. And you can see all the air bubbles being pumped out of the system. I'm just gonna keep it going at full speed and just kind of keep giving it coolant. And it's going to continue to push air bubbles out of the system. And I think we're good to just take this out now. And now, this part, if you've done everything right, will look just like this. So if you made it this far, congratulations. You got a fully liquid-cooled system, and at this point, everything should be working fine. You'll see a bunch of little bubbles every now and then, but those will work itself out over the next couple of days or so. Within a few days, this whole thing will be totally saturated, and you won't hear shouldn't hear any bubble noises or any gurgling noises. Those will all have worked itself out. If you still see air in your lines or something like that, it's a good idea to try to tilt the case a little bit. Okay, we can edit that out, right? But as you can see, this is real time. We've only been running this for a couple of minutes, and you can see basically the lines are all solid. You don't really see much bubbles anymore. So there's some bubbles in the CPU block. I'm trying to work those out. So now you might be asking, what's next? Well, it's time to game. As you can see, look at that CPU temperature. That is just insane. Be that this isn't a high wattage CPU, it is just an i5 and all. Only 38 degrees on the CPU core. That is awesome. Being that this doesn't take a lot of wattage, which is understandable, but that is still some awesome temperatures. We didn't see anything close to that on air. It was probably around 60 or 70 or so on air, so we're almost half of what it was. We need to play some video games to see how well we're doing. Being that we're only running a 3050, it's still gonna put a decent load on our CPU. Yes, Microsoft, future owner of Blizzard, you can take all my information. All right, let's kill some people, like actually. Oh, okay, never mind, I guess I got killed. Ouch, okay. I guess I really do suck at this game. Ow, okay. Yeah, don't worry, that's totally normal, guys, totally normal. All right, let's see what our temperatures are doing. So we hit a high of 43, pretty low still. That's still pretty excellent for liquid cooling. On air cooling, this was getting to like 80 degrees or so. But this isn't really about like getting the lowest temps or whatever, because then we'd be using other things. This is what happens when you don't go in with a team and you stagger in. Don't ever do that in Overwatch. All right, let's get out of this. Let's play one more game of something else, and then we'll try to see how the temps are. Something a little bit more demanding like Halo. All right, now we're gonna fire up some Halo and see how well we do. Again, this is on a 3050, so not expecting too many amazing things. We wanna see how the CPU temperature is holding up. So we're gonna go ahead and reset it because we just started the game. Yeah. Hold on. All right, let's go try to kill someone, boys. Ow, ow, ow. I guess I ain't gonna do too well in this game, but let's take a look at the temperatures. Oh wow, yeah, we're still in the very lows. It's a constant 30 to 40 degrees. We had a peak of like 50 for a second there. Liquid cooling is definitely achievable. You can do it yourself. It's not that hard. Oh, ow, 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 that hurts, ow, oh, okay. Well, I may not be good at this game, but I am good at... What matters is, this is how you do a liquid cooled system. We just went through it step by step of how to do it and how you can do one too. If you're interested in building one yourself, all the parts will be linked in the description below. And if you got any questions on your liquid cool build, or if you want to do one of your own, you can always join our Discord down in the description below as well. Please join our Discord if you can, it's awesome. There's people talking this. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next one.